All right, so starting with the Django complete wine API, I forked that over. I'm gonna get that down to my local machine. All right, so git clone that down. I want to cd into it. And get a coding window open. All right, let's toss that over here. Okay, so this is our backend. Again, this is the completed wine API. This is what we were working on last week. So you guys can use your own API or just use the one that we have up on our curriculum or GitHub story. So I'm just gonna get this up and running to make sure that we have everything in order. So to go into the process again, we've probably done this dozens of times, but first thing I want to do is create a virtual environment.
Chris, did you want to be sharing your screen?
Oh, am I not? Sorry, guys. New space.
Oh wait, no, you are.
I can see your screen.
Oh,
sorry, that's my fault.
No problem.
Getting used to this whole thing.
All right, so create my virtual environment. Next thing I want to do is actually use it. So I'm going to do source VV, which is my virtual environment, bin and activate. Okay, cool. I know that the git ignore by default uses V&V, so just want to make sure that whatever you name your virtual environment, the git ignore is actually ignoring it. So I'm going to update that from my specific virtual environment folder. Okay, so that looks good. All right, so I've done that. Kind of looking at my setup here, so it seems like we do have a requirements.txt already created for us. So we can kind of see everything that's in there. Looks like there's a bunch of libraries we're going to have to install. So luckily, we don't want to do it one by one. We could just use the requirements.txt. Anyone remember the command for using the requirements.txt to install all those libraries?
Was it pip freeze?
Pip freeze is how you create the requirements.txt. So yeah, good to remember that command. But if we have a requirements.txt already, anyone remember?
Is
Was
it
it
the
like
dash
install
document?
flag r requirements.txt?
Yeah, I think I heard that from a couple people. So yep, pip install -r or -r, and then requirements.txt. So that should basically just read your requirements.txt file and install all those libraries. Seems like there's at least a dozen of them. All right, so while that's going through, I'm just going to kind of jump ahead and look at my project. So settings.py, let's see, want to make sure we have our application listed. So again, that's been done. Just want to check that off mentally. Second thing I want to know is what database are we going to be using. So I could change this value, but it seems like we need a wine API database using Postgres. So let's see. All right, get that installed. Pretty sure I have a wine API database. I'm going to create DB, let's call it wine API new. Pardon my typo there. All right, so I'm going to change the name. Again, just need to match the database name that you're going to be using. So in this case, I call it new. Okay, so again, I've got a virtual environment, installed all my libraries, made sure that my settings file has the correct apps listed and my database name matches the one I'm going to use. All right, so I think those are the main steps. Can anyone else think of something that I might need to do here before I get my server up and running?
You need to, oh, never mind.
So yeah.
Make migrations and migrate?
Yep, Jack's got it. So again, just kind of going through the already completed API here. We do have a wine model created, but keep in mind that our database does not have this data. So we actually need to, as Jack said, make migrations. That should be done already, I believe. There should be a migrations file, but always good to just double check by running make migrations. So if you Python manage py, make migrations. All right, so in this case, I got no changes detected. That just means whatever migrations file exists already in the migrations folder has all the changes that are needed to be pushed. So a new migrations file was not created. If I did make a change to my model, it created a new migrations file, appending it to this folder. All right. Let's see. What if let's just add a field just for fun. So if I had wine color. Again, I'm not a wine enthusiast, so I'm not sure if color is the right word, but we'll just do that as models dot char field and max length. So that's 64. All right, so if I do modify my models, as in the fields that are in there, if I run make migrations again, sometimes you will see this if you're updating, at the bottom of the screen, it'll say you're adding a new field. What do you want to do with the existing records in your database? So you have two options. You can provide a default for all the records that might be in there. Currently, my database is empty, so it's not going to matter. Or I could just quit and specify a default in my models, as in there's a value I could put in here, default equals, I could say like red can be by default. But in this case, I don't want all my records to have a default. So I could just say one, just do empty string. Okay, so notice now that there were changes, it created a new migrations file over here. Pull this out. So it named it wine color. So it kind of like tells me what got modified here. All right, so there's two migrations files. I actually want to get my database to have those records. So how do I actually get those migration files to actually run? That's Python manage py and migrate. So it's going to take all of the migration files in here, run these on the database, and then that should create the appropriate tables in the database. All right, so hopefully you guys are all familiar with this process.
Yeah, I thought you ran that already.
No, so I ran make migrations earlier. So I did make migrations twice. First time I ran it, I got no changes detected. And that's because the migrations file that already existed in the project had all the changes for the wine model, which again, all this was done for us in the project. But when I added a new field, I ran make migrations again, so that there's a new migration script created for that addition.
Oh,
Right.
okay, you added a new field.
Yep, again, just for fun, added it. I don't think it's required for the project at hand. But after you run it, you should see that all these items got pushed and created. Next up, I'm going to be using my admin terminal. So to do that, I need to create a super user. Anyone remember the command for that?
Is it Django admin create super user?
What was that? Django admin?
Django admin create
No, I think
super user? Or is it Python manage?
manage by.
Yeah, so sometimes you can use Django admin keyword. I'm not sure if this works, but it doesn't hurt to try. So it creates super user. Yep, so Django admin does not know that command, but yep, Python manage.py is usually like 99% of the time you just want to use Python manage.py, and yep, create super user. Okay, and now you can name your super user. If you leave it blank, it'll default to your computer name. I usually just like going with admin, password admin. Okay, at this point, I don't care about security, so I'll do that and say yes. All right, so we have a super user. Our database should be good to go. Let's actually get our server up and running now and see if everything works. So if I do Python manage py and run server. Okay, looks like it's up. Again, default port is 8000. You can specify a different port if you wanted to. When you do run server, after that, you can specify a port number to change it up. All right, so that should be running. Let's, do I have my window here? Here we are. Okay, so got to this page, so that looks familiar. Looks like we gotta go to wines. All right, there we go. So this is what we should see. It's a JSON response. So we have some JSON data shown at this endpoint, which is localhost/wines. So we need some wines in here. Easiest way for me, I like using the admin panel. I think that's most convenient for me. So I'm just going to use the admin panel. Again, we have different options. You can use fixtures. You can use the shell and kind of add in data that way, or the admin panel works just as well. Okay, so we're here. I can't edit my wines here. Can anyone remember why I'm not seeing wines listed here?
You have to
Is
register.
it we
your
haven't
models.
seeded?
It's not with seeding. Alex, what did you say?
I said you have to register your models.
Yep. So again, just a lot of steps required with Django. Sometimes easy to forget them. So in this case, I intentionally, sorry, I did not intentionally forget, but I accidentally forgot here. Yep. So we do admin.site register. And then the model, in this case, wine is the model. We need to obviously import it here. So do wines, wines.models import wine. Okay, so that with that change, our server should refresh. There we go. If I refresh my page, there we go. So we have wines now that we can modify. So if I go here, there's no wine. Let's add a wine. Anyone got a wine that they prefer?
Malbec,
How do you spell that?
Malbec.
Price, ballpark price, $49.99 maybe.
Sure.
Do you know the varietal? Tell.
Oh, geez.
I'll just say
It's from
we'll say it's Jonas. Jonas varietal.
Argentina. Okay.
Some fancy color. Do you know what color it is?
Yeah, I think it's typically red.
Red wine. Okay, so save that. Cool. So now we have one record. If we go back to our landing page, there we go. So we got our entry here. Looks like color is not shown here. That is not what I wanted. So why would not colors be there? Looks like because my form didn't have it included. So if I add color here, save that, server should refresh. All right. Go back here. Color was here, but now if I save that, nope.
Is it in your dunder method?
So my dunder method would be used for my admin panel, but always good to say check. So here we just want to show wine name. So again, this dunder method is used in my admin panel. What I see here is from the dunder string method.
Does it matter if it's in double quotes or single quotes?
It should not matter. All good questions though. For my forms, I added in double quotes, single quotes should work just as well. So if you notice in my admin panel, I was able to add it here. So it looks like my response, and I'm guessing serializers is the issue here. So if I look at serializers, yep, there we go. So really, we're using manual serializers. We're not using Django REST framework. Looks like here is where I need to add that new field. So again, if you're not using Django REST framework, there's a few more steps you need to go through. So if I add color, wine, color, that should now show me the value. Like when we serialize it, it should add in wine color to that data. Since we have it in two places, we should probably update that in both places. All right, there we go. Color added there. Okay, so add a new field. So I need to make a few more changes. Again, when you're doing this, you don't need to add a new field. I just wanted to do that just to get exposure to what I may need to modify. So again, a couple of things I didn't modify after I modified my models. One was my forms. So if this is used by the user, they're going to want a color field in there. And then serializers for the data that we're sending out. When we serialize it, we want to add that field in there too. So with those changes, I think we should be good here. So let's find out. Let's refresh. All right, there we go. We got color red. Let's add a couple more wines just to change it up. So
Ace of spades.
Ace of spades. That's fancy sounding. Ace of spades. Price, ballpark price.
Probably like 2,000 or 3,000 per bottle.
Really? Wow.
Oh,
Okay.
oh yeah.
Let's
The
go.
high dollar stuff.
$2,000. Varietal. We'll say that's Tim. Description.
It's a champagne. That's all I know. It's some sort of champagne.
Fancy champagne. How do you call it? Spanish
I
champagne.
think it's actually from France.
So champagne, is that always clear or yellow or whatever?
I have no idea.
White.
I think it'd be termed white. Yeah.
Okay, so we added ace of spades. Let's get one more in here. Just have some data, some extra data. Anyone else got a wine that they prefer?
Prison wine.
Okay, that's fine. That's
Hooch wine.
Wait, is
Prison
that
wine.
really a wine?
$3.
Let's say the price of that is
$3.99.
cigarettes.
One pack of cigarettes.
Yeah. One pack of cigarettes. I can't even type all that in there. Let's just say 1 cig. Varietal. Who suggested
Orange.
that one? Orange, okay, with that. Probably not your first. And then color, is color orange also?
Probably brown, I'd imagine.
All right.
Maybe random.
Oh gosh. All right. This is not gonna make me a wine drinker, but okay. So we have three data records. If we refresh our endpoint here, we should see all of those listed. If you go to, if you want to see a particular detail, how do actually, what URL would I go to? Anyone can remember from last week?
The ID, but in this case, you'd have to guess because your serializer hasn't shown it. So it'd be like /1, 2, or 3.
Yep, I think it's 2 should be my ace of spades. Yep, there it is. Again, if you did want to see that ID in your admin panel, there is a way to do it. I always have to look this up, but when you're registering your model, you can create a new class. I can call it wine admin. And here we need to add something. So this is where I'll hit the Googles because I don't memorize all this. Let's go with Django admin add field. See if we can figure this out quickly. Make this larger. I did this last week, but my memory isn't the greatest. How to mark field. Let's see. Show. Again, this isn't vital, but I just want to see how we can do this. Is it read only fields? Is that what I want? So I need to derive from models or admin.model admin. And can I just add a read only field? Fingers crossed, this is what I need. All right, so again, I'm just creating a new class that's going to have extra fields in it. In this case, I want to show ID. Add that in here as a second input to register. Let's see if that gives us what I'm looking for. So save that, go back to my admin, prison wine. All right, there we go. So notice down here, the ID is shown. So it's kind of convenient instead of me going through my database. So prison wine is ID 3. Probably don't want to be touching that too often. But okay, ace of spades is 2 and Malbec should be 1. Again, those always, like if we delete a wine from our database, let's actually delete prison wine because I don't want that in my records. But delete that. Or if you want to delete it, yep, sure. Let's add a new wine just to see what the ID is going to be. Any other wine suggestions? Again, I don't drink wine, so I don't have anything I can put.
You could do Franzia?
I heard Franzia. Hopefully that's how you spell it. Price, let's go with, I don't know, $24.99. Varietal, Sarah, so that one says her
Some
name.
expensive box wine.
It's a box wine. Let's put that in here. And then color, what color is it?
Any color you want.
I'll say rainbow then.
Sure.
Again, I don't drink wine, so I'm the last person to ask about wine information. All right, so we look at Franzia. Notice that the ID is 4. So since we deleted ID 3, that ID does not get reused actually. So just gotta remember that we don't have an ID 3. If we try to go to an ID 3, let's actually see what happens. So 3, notice wine does not exist for ID 3. But if we go to ID 4, that should be our new wine. So you gotta keep that in mind in case you're trying to get anywhere. Okay, cool. All right, so our backend seems to be up and running. Don't want to spend too much time here because this is what we did last week. But now today's goal is to actually create a React front end that can call our Django backend. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my coding window and have a couple options here. I can create another project in here. So you have multiple projects running together. Might get kind of confusing, but so to kind of alleviate that, I'm going to create a new project. But again, you can have multiple projects in the same VS Code. There's nothing that stops you doing that. So I'm going to do make dir. Let's call it wine front end. And cd into that. Okay.
Looks like the video is lagging a little.
Oh, sorry about that. I'll try to speak slower. Hopefully, I guess I should be speaking slower currently anyway. Can you guys see my VS Code here?
Yes, sir.
The new one I created here. All right. All right, so this is empty project. Nothing in here right now. This is going to be a React front end project. So we're going to need to install React. Anyone remember how to get a React project from scratch going?
Is it never mind, I forgot.
All right, it's
Wasn't that
npx.
Django admin start project or something?
So that'd be for Django. For React, we gotta use npx, create dash React app. Yep, easy to forget. I mean, not vital that you memorize it. Again, that's what Google's for. And then create React app. I'll just create here. So, all right, so it's gonna take probably a minute or so. So let's let that do its thing. Meanwhile, I'm gonna read the README file to see what we're gonna be doing, or the curriculum page to see what we're doing today. So again, we have our backend going. Now we're gonna create some front end pages where we could actually call our Django backend. All right, so let's see. All right, we're creating our front end. That's kind of what I'm doing here. We need to install a few other items. So it looks like we want React Router, React Bootstrap table. This no longer seems to work. Yeah, I think I ran into this last cohort. So I'm not going to actually install React Bootstrap table, or I can try, but no guarantees it'll work. Okay, so let's see how our installation's going. Still going. All right, so it's kind of peeking ahead. We're going to create an app.js that's going to have a router in it, and we've done this before, so hopefully nothing is surprising there. We're going to create a home page. It looks like create a wine page that's going to have probably some wine detail, and then create some fetch calls. All right, so let's see how our installation is going. Still taking some time. Always like to use this time to reflect on life. Just think about whatever is on my mind. Hopefully this finishes up soon. Okay, so just kind of reading on this page again, there's a lot we're gonna do here. We're gonna create a wine list component, it looks like, homepage component. So it looks like on our curriculum page, we're using class-based components. I'm happy to kind of go with that. Or if you guys prefer, we could switch this over to functional-based components, but then we won't be able to kind of copy and paste directly from the curriculum page. You guys have any preference? Do you guys want to do this in class-based or functional-based?
Let's keep it simple with class-based.
Yep, I like Don's suggestion that kind of just going with the code that's provided. And then again, if we had enough time or if you guys want to do it on your own, kind of get practice of converting it to a function-based component. Okay, let's check our installation. All right, cool. Looks like it's done. We got our happy hacking message here. Looks like we're good. That's good to see. We had a few other libraries we wanted to install, so let's make sure we don't forget to do that. So we have npm install. I'm just going to copy and paste. So don't just type anything. So I want React Router DOM. That should be going. We want React Bootstrap.
What does that -- save do?
It's a good question. I will defer to Google. Save for npm. Looks like the npm docs. Save. All right, so save default is true. Saved install packages to package.json. So it looks like the default is true. I'm not sure why we got to explicitly do it. Maybe just might have changed. Maybe before default was false, or maybe we just want to be explicit about what we're doing. So that's going to actually add it to your package.json. So package.json is similar to requirements.txt for Python. So that's going to be a record of all the libraries your project is using. I assume if you don't use the save flag, you can still install the library, but it won't be added to your dependencies. So your package.json won't list it as a required library. Good question though. Always good to know what we're using. So it looks like that should have ran. Let me get the other libraries here. So you have React Bootstrap.
Has it got a blank npm install on the last line?
I was kind of curious about that too, Sarah. So you and I are kind of thinking alike. I think that's going to go through our package.json and kind of reinstall all these items. I think that's kind of redundant, but I'm not going to run that last line, and let's see if we run into any trouble. I don't think we need to run that as is. And then again, last library, I'm not sure if it's going to run with our latest Reacts. I definitely ran into some issues. Yeah, it looks like
You've got a comment at the end of that line.
Yeah, that's my goof. All right, so that may or may not install. It might install, or okay, it looks like we got some errors. Yeah, I ran into this before, so I think we can get it by without using this. We might just modify some other code. There might be a way to get this working. I'm not going to spend too much time bothering with it. It's just a UI feature for organizing our data. So let's proceed. So I'm not going to run npm install. I don't think that's necessary since we created this product from scratch. Let's kind of get to it. So first thing I want to know is, does my React server work? So we can see that by doing npm start. Right, so wine front end is my project. Should be loading up my server. Let's give it a moment. Starting development server. All right, there we go. And if it works correctly, we should see that logo, that spinning logo. That looks kind of like an atom. Should be coming up here any second now, hopefully. I don't know, my React projects always seem to take a while to load. All right, there we go. So this is the default page you should see if your React server is up and running. So it looks like we can check that off. Looks good. Okay, so with that, let's kind of get to adding our pages here. So I'm going to go to my source directory. That's where we developers going to add our items. In index.js, I almost never modify that. So I'm just going to go to app.js and add my logic in here. Let's get some more space. Okay, so I'm just going to erase everything inside my div. And let's add, h1 hello world, and make sure that we see our changes. Yep. All right. So it looks like that's working. All right. Let's go back to our curriculum page. Again, I'm going to be doing a lot of copy and pasting, so it'll save us from having to write code. We'll modify it as we desire. So here, let's just copy everything and drop that in here. All right. So again, class-based component, class app extends component. We have a render method. Looks like we have a browser router. This is what we kind of use for routing within our app. We have two routes. We have just the slash route is going to be our homepage. And then if we have wine slash particular wine ID, we should get to our wine page. So it looks like we need to create those pages. Let's create a new folder, call it pages inside there. Let's create a couple items. So I'll do homepage as one of my components. And what's that one? Wine page. Okay, so homepage, let's see what they had to offer us here. Homepage, nothing too exciting going on here. It's going to do copy and paste again. Paste that in here. All right, so again, simple component here. Again, class homepage extends component. So again, that's component is going to be our base class. That's where all the component functionality kind of comes in from. Then we can add on to it with our homepage. So in this case, we're just going to render homepage here. Nothing too exciting right now. And then for wine page, we'll copy and paste also. Because right now we don't have anything too exciting to show. All right, so again, our wine page is going to be like our wine detail page. So we're going to hit up the back end for wine details. Homepage, I'm kind of expecting that we're going to call the wine list backend page. So if we still have our Django project, which I think we do. Let's look at our routes that exist here. So if I go to wines and then urls.py, these are the routes that exist on our backend. So it looks like wine list is going to be just the base URL. If we want to add a new one, we would go to /new. If we want to see a detail for a wine, we just got to go to the ID of it. All right, so you got to always make sure you know what routes you need to tie back to. All right, so this is our back end. Let's go to our front end here. And what's next? So I think next we want to add our API calls. Make sure that that's working. All right, so this is using on Heroku. We're going to get to that. So I'm actually going to do this off of localhost right now. We'll get it to Heroku after we get stuff working on our local host. So again, keep in mind, this is for Heroku specifically. We might need to modify that. All right, so I'm going to copy this and create a new folder, call it API. Again, these names are just by convention. You don't have to follow this naming convention for React projects. Just keep that in mind. Here, I'll call it wine API.js. Right, and then paste in what I just copied from the curriculum page. And there we go. All right, so as I mentioned, we don't want to use cores anywhere Heroku app right now, at least the way I'm going about it. So I'm going to create a const base URL variable. That's going to point to my local host. So HTTPS, sorry, not S, localhost and port 8000. Okay, so that's where my backend server is located. And then for this, let's see, fetch wines by ID. That's going to go. All right, so again, to verify what route we're going to slash wine ID, because that is what our Django project has defined. Fetch wines, that's going to be the wine list. If I remember that, that's just our base URL, right? So if I go to this manually, that should be what data I want. So we were doing that before. Paste that in here. Nope, slash wines. Looks like I forgot about that. Wines. Is that what you're going to say, Sean?
Yeah, I was also gonna say, shouldn't there be a wines in front? Yeah.
Yep. So that wines, I missed that in my initial pass. Notice that the paths here are just empty path and slash new, but we do have a prefix set in our project URL. So that's where the slash wines is coming from. So I kind of forgot about that, but yeah, looks like we need to go to wines to get to our API.
That really throws me off how the paths don't have that prefix, but you have to just figure out that they all have that prefix.
Yeah, so that's what's being done right here in URL patterns. We're saying all of these URLs coming from wines.urls is going to be prefixed with wines. So yeah, you're basically tacking on paths as many as you want. So yeah, you could leave this blank. There's nothing that's going to stop you or harm you. But you generally want like things organized, kind of like folders. You want paths that make sense. So in that case, it looks like we're going to wines. All right, so went to here. This is the data we expect from this endpoint. So if I go back to my front end, switching windows here, we want to go to wines here for slash here, slash wines here to get the wine list, and then wines slash wine ID should get us one particular wine. Kind of look at the fetch structure here. So again, fetch returns a promise. That's something very important to understand. Fetch will return a promise. The then this will handle the promise once it resolves. We'll get a response, and we can do whatever we want with the response. In this case, it looks like we're just showing the JSON from the response. Okay, .json is another asynchronous method, so this will also return a promise.
Quick question, Alker. Would you normally put a fetch in a try catch block in case it returns an error?
So with fetch, so it's a good question. Always get to think about like code security. With fetch is almost never going to fail. This is different than saying that you may or may not get a good response back. So fetch, the way it just kind of works, unless something catastrophic happens, fetch is not going to fail its promise. The promise is always going to resolve successfully. But what you get back might be, a 404 error or some other error page. So you need to actually inspect the status of your response to kind of determine, hey, did my request actually go through as I wanted? That's a good question. So no, in this case, I wouldn't be too cautious about wrapping it with a try except or a try catch, I guess, in JavaScript. But always a good question. It doesn't hurt to add in try catches. I think the only danger is theoretically you could have a try catch against around every line of code that you write. But then it's kind of unsightly. So yeah, if you expect it to kind of throw an exception, then definitely. If it's going to be pretty much impossible for it to throw an exception, I would kind of leave it off. But I'm glad you're thinking that route, Sean. Okay, so we have our fetch wine by API using localhost, exporting it, and let's see if we could actually use it. So going back to my homepage, I'm not sure if we have that here. All right, we do have this coded up, it looks like, but I'm going to actually write this by hand, just get more practice. So instead of doing copy and pasting, let's see if we remember how to actually use our API and make fetch requests appropriately. So here I'm going to import my API that I just created. So I'm going to do import wine API from, got to find that file, /API, there we are. All right. So we're importing an object. So one thing I want to point out, whatever we're exporting from our API, this is what we're getting back. We're getting this object back. It's going to have two entries, fetch wine by ID and fetch wines. So if I go back to my homepage, I can call this whatever I want. Again, this is just some object I'm getting back. I can call it W for short if I want to. again, you want to name it appropriately, but it's not, you're not limited to name it anything in particular. In this case, I'll just call it wine API, just to match kind of what I'm importing from. And there we go. All right. So now this will give us access to those fetch methods. My homepage wants to list all the wines. So I don't really care about the detail, but I do want, maybe to list the title of the wine. So I'll probably use wine name. I'm probably not going to list any of these details on my homepage. Okay, so let's see. There is an issue here that I kind of have spotted. So notice that our routes are by wine ID. Currently, I'm not providing a wine ID back to my front end. So that's something I think I need to change, right? Because our routes in our, where is it? Sorry, I guess in our backend. Our backend routes require a wine ID. So if I go to, where was it, URLs? Yeah, so we need a wine ID that we need to specify when we call the backend. So the front end needs to know the wine IDs. Currently, we are not passing wine IDs part of the serialization. So I think that's something I want to change right now. I don't think I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me just add ID here. So we could add a new field, call it ID, and it will be wine.id. All right, so that ID field is automatically created for all your models. Just remember that for Django. Let's do that for wine detail. This is self.body.id. Okay, so if I save my backend project, let's see that refreshed. Refresh here. All right, now we have our IDs. So we have 1, 2, and 4. So again, our front end needs those IDs so they can get to make the appropriate backend calls eventually. So I've added that. Okay, so back to my homepage on my front end. Sorry if I keep switching too often. But here, we have our wine API. Our API makes a call to localhost 8000/wine. So that should give us a response and then give us JSON back. So let's put that in here. So does anyone remember the lifecycle method where we should be making API calls? I know it's been a while since we talked about those lifecycle methods, but again, for class-based components, there's a method called component did mount. This, again, if you read documentation, this is usually the place you want to make an initial API call. You don't want to do it in your constructor. You want to do it in component did mount. So this gets fired after your component gets added to the DOM. So here we can make API call as needed. Actually going to create an async function. So let's do get wine list. Async. All right, so get wine list is going to actually do the fetch for me. I'm not going to do it right in component mount, just for personal preferences. So let's say data. Okay, so here, get wine list is async function, so I can use await in it. Again, if I didn't make this an async function, I would only be able to use .then. Everyone kind of clear on await versus using the .then construct? Are you guys familiar? Do you guys prefer one or the other? Kind of just curious. Does anyone have a preference? We do it either way. All right. Silent crowd today. So I'm going to.
I was going to say, which way is more preferred? Does that really matter, or?
I'd say preference. It's up to the developer. I prefer async await. I like the way it reads. Like when I'm reading the code, when I see like an await keyword, to me, my mind registers that, okay, we're going to wait for this to complete asynchronously, and then we'll get a result back. .then does the same thing. It's just, for me, it's a little harder to parse. But I think it's strictly up to the developer what you prefer. So I'm going to go with async await unless anyone strongly prefers the .then construct. But here we go. First, again, looking at our API, we're getting a JSON response back. So we need to wait on that. Let's see. Right here, we're going to call let's data equal wine API fetch wines. And I don't think we need any parameters we need to pass in there. So we get our data back, but key thing here, we need to await, right? If we don't await this, data is actually going to be a promise, right? So if I did it this way, it still works, right? If I did data promise, this is where I'd use the dot then. So I did create a promise, I do dot then, and then handle my data in here. All right, so let's actually do it both ways just to see that it in fact results in the same item. So in this case, if I don't do an await keyword here, fetch wine is going to return a promise to me, not the actual data. So that's going to be a promise object. The dot then here will get the data once it resolves, and then I could print it out to console. So that's, again, using dot then. And then you can also do it the await way. So we'll do it two different ways. Let's do it this way first. I know I'm kind of going against what I said I was going to do. So component mount, we'll need to call this method. So get wine list. And then we probably want to render the wine list eventually. So, all right, so we're going to get some data back from our API call. I need to store that data somehow so that I can actually render it. What type of value should I create here to actually store that data that's returned?
State.
Yep, Jack's got it. So we want a state value. So we'll create a state object. And I'll probably call it wines. And that'll be an empty list to start. All right, so we're going to render that wine list somehow. We'll do it down here. Let's create a method called render wine list. That's going to have a this on it. This is not intentional. I forget the this keyword like half the time. So in a class, again, you want to use the this keyword to reference internal items. So here we'll add render, and then render wine list is what I called it. And don't put a space there. All right, render wine list is going to basically go through my state value and create some elements from that. So if I do let elements, we'll use map. Hopefully you guys are familiar with your array methods. We've referenced that these are going to be used commonly. So I do this dot state dot wines dot map, and then map takes in a function. That function takes in an item and an index if you want it. So here we'll return what we want rendered. So each wine list will, let's say, will be, let's make it an H3. And this will be wrapped in a tag and have an href. All right, so let's give me a link right now. Right now, I don't know where it's going to link to, so I'm just going to leave that kind of as a filler. Here, we get an item back. So wines is going to, again, be a list that's going to have all of these as entries. So wines is a list, notice square brackets, and then we're going to have each index is going to be an object. So here I want to pull off the wine name. So that's named wine underscore name. So if I get item is that wine object. I'll do dot wine name. And I need to
wrap that in curly braces. Oh, okay.
Absolutely. Yep. Nope. You caught me there. So anytime I'm referencing a JavaScript variable or an item, or sorry, a JavaScript, something in JavaScript, you do want to wrap it. So if I left that off, let's actually see what happens if I leave that off. But Reno definitely was on to me there. If I return elements, okay, hopefully our React front end is working. Let's go back to our React app. Hello world, homepage, got nothing here.
Doesn't it normally return quite literally what you write?
Say that again, Alex.
I was saying when it returned like item.wine name instead of the location in the memory.
You're right. Yep.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So I wanted to show that, but it looks like we don't have anything in our wines list. But you're right. If I did not wrap this, it will show literally items.wine underscore name. You're right. So curly braces are needed here. But again, we don't have any wines being listed here. It looks like our API call is not set up correctly. That's because when we make our API call, we get our data, but notice we're not storing it anywhere. So if we looked at our console in our browser, we should see that data, hopefully. Right now, we're not switching that data over to our state value. But let's look at our console, make sure we're getting the appropriate data back. So if I bring this up. All right, so it looks like we got a CORS violation here. So we're gonna need to fix that. Okay, so let's talk about CORS. This is kind of like a security measure kind of built into Django. So here, if I go back to my backend, let's see what I need to do there. So I'll go to my settings file. I want to see if there's a whitelist. If I search for whitelists, no results. Okay. So I think our curriculum page kind of details this at the bottom. So I'm going to scroll down there, kind of spy on what I need to do. All right, so allow Django to receive CORS requests. This is, again, a security measure built into Django. Here we need to install a few items so that we can actually make this API call. So we need a whitelist URLs that can access our Django backend. So here, I'm going to follow these steps. So install Django CORS headers. Let's do that in our backend. So let's bring up a new terminal. All right, so I'm going to again just follow the curriculum page, cd whatever your path is, or install CORS headers. Do that. That might have been installed already, actually, if I remember that correctly. Let's see, requirements.txt. I have Django's. Oh, didn't have that. Okay. So CORS headers being installed. And then since I installed a new library, I generally want to always do pip freeze and update my requirements.txt. So I do requirements.txt. All right, so notice I rewrote my requirements files, and hopefully Django CORS headers should be added there. Looks like it is. So that's good. All right, so install Django CORS headers. Next, I need to do go to my installed apps in my settings file and allow CORS headers, or add in CORS headers to my installed apps. So let's find our settings file. Installed apps is up here. Let's tack that on here. All right, so we installed the library. Now we're telling Django, hey, we want to actually use some of that library. Goodness. And then this is a key thing. You need to copy over cors.middleware.cors middleware, but it needs to be above Django middleware.common.com middleware. Again, this is just something specific to how this library is working. So just make sure it's above common middleware in your list of middleware items. So let's find that here. Templates, where are you? Maybe I missed it above. There it is, middleware. All right. So again, there's this common middleware. You want to make sure it's above that. So I can put it here, or I'm pretty sure I can just toss this at the very top of the list, just to make sure it comes before Django middleware.common middleware. All right, so if I save that, now the last thing we can do is add a whitelist. So this just says, hey, I'm giving authorization, or basically allowing this URL to access my endpoint here in Django. So I copy CORS origin whitelist, and that's somewhere down here. Again, it doesn't really matter where it goes. I'll just do it at the very bottom, so you know where to find it. CORS origin whitelist, and this is just list. In this case, I want my localhost to access this. So let me add HTTP / localhost. And I think 3000 is my React server. So that's where I'm, I think, making a request from. Let's see if that's what I want. Slash there. All right, so I added that. Is my server back up running? No module name CORS headers. So let's kill our server, restart it. Python manage.
Is it HTTP or is it HTTPS?
Good question. I think localhost is always HTTP. I guess it's kind of hard to see here. Can I copy and paste this? Yeah, so I copied and paste my URL from directly from my address bar. And if you paste that, notice it's going to be HTTP, TTP without the S. Good question though. Usually pretty much everything is HTTPS, but your localhost is not using the secure protocol. Okay, so edit that. Server needs to get up and going again. Manage.py, run server. Let's see if that actually gets up. Nope, it says no module name CORS headers. Why would that be? All right, just got a lengthy error message here. Did I forget something? Let's kind of reread our page. So we included it here and here. Did I forget a comma? Nope, I got my comma here. That's why I'm switching these apps, if that makes a difference. Nope, no module name course headers. Why is this?
Glad that didn't help. That would be scary.
What was that, John?
I'm glad that didn't help. That would be mysterious.
Yeah, the order of that I don't think is the issue. Let's try to parse this error together. So it looks like no module found course headers in settings. That's reloading. Oh, I know what I think I know what the issue is. Did I not install in my, yeah. So when I created my pip install, notice I wasn't in my virtual environment. I think that might be the issue here. So let's undo that. So if I go into my virtual environment, source.bnv, then activate. So I opened a new terminal and that was by default not in my virtual environment. So easy to make that mistake. If I do pip install, it was Django dash course headers. Let's see if that gets it right. So I want to do pip freeze requirements txt. Okay, let's see if that cleaned up the issue. So again, I was not in my virtual environment before. Let's see if that was holding me up. I still don't imagine that was the source of it, but maybe it was. All right, so if I go back to my Python window, let's try this one more time on the server. Okay, so I got a different error this time. It says should not have a path.
Hey, Ankur, could we get a break here soon?
Yep, let's actually take a break right now while I try to error handle this. I'm not even sure what this is saying, so I'm probably going to do some Googling, which is probably not too interesting for you guys. I'll find a fix, and then after break, I'll make sure
Is it complaining about the slash at the end of the URL?
right here. Let's see. Hey, Don got it. All right, thanks, Don. Yeah, for some reason that slash is not appropriate. All right, thanks, Don. With
Now
that,
the break is canceled.
no. Let's take a break. I think with that success, we earned a break. So let's got an 8-minute break. So be back around 11:12. Thanks for asking for a break. Sorry, I know we've gone long. So yeah, let's take an 8-minute break. Be back by 11:12, and we'll make sure we could make these calls from our front end. All right, see you guys in a bit. All right, so during the break, I ran into another issue, and it's something I want to highlight because I bet at least some of you guys might run into this, and it's something that's really subtle, and it's not quite obvious what's going on. So if I go back to my front end, so this is my back end, again, just to review, we added an entry to our whitelist. Basically, this whitelist means we're approving other origins to access our backend server. If you're curious to read more about CORS, you can obviously Google it. So here it talks about CORS, cross-origin resource sharing. Again, by default, Django is only going to accept internal requests, but if you want some other URL to access or make a call to your Django backend, you need to approve it. So again, it's a security measure so that it's just not by default, not anyone can make requests to your server. Obviously, like there's malicious people out there that can, maybe do like a denial of service attack or some other attack on your server if didn't have this protections by default. So you guys again can kind of read about CORS. Just know it's a security measure that we need to kind of get around for our test cases here. Okay, so again, we whitelisted localhost 3000. That is our front end URL, so that our front end can make requests to our back end, and things will work appropriately with CORS. All right, so with that in place, our front end should be able to make requests to our back end. One thing though I want to highlight here, so let me switch back to my front end code. I have something called base URL, which is again what I'm using to make these requests. This slash here is apparently really vital. So initially, actually, when I had this, I just had localhost 8000/wines and no slash at the end here. With that, when I tried to run this, I was running into an error. So if I go back to here, notice I have an error in my console here. Maybe I should pull that up a little bit. This failed, so I was not able to successfully get there. This again doesn't really point you to the error. I just know from experience I've ran into this before, and I was like, why isn't this working? You need a ending slash here. If I save that and now go back to my homepage, notice I got my wines data down here. So a slash can make a big difference. Again, it's kind of frustrating, especially when you're like, you know, it's not pointing you to the error and you're like, I'm doing everything correctly, so I'm not getting my data. Always just make sure you have that ending slash here. It's just required for things to work correctly. I know that's not a good answer, but here it looks like with that slash, I'm getting my wine data that we created before. So we have Malbec, Ace of Spades, and Franzia. All right, so again, if you run into this error, you think everything's correct, just double check, triple check to see that you have a pending slash to your path.
Question, Ankur. So if you have a slash in the base URL in the fetch wine by ID fetch call, do you need another slash there?
No, good point there. So don't want double slashes there. So let's make sure we don't have double slashes. That probably would have caught an error that I was going to run into later. Okay, so right now we're using our fetch wines call here. So again, we're fetching to this URL that returns a promise. The dot then here will, once this promise from fetch resolves, it'll give us back an HTTP response object. On that object, we're going to call .json. Again, reading documentation, .json is another asynchronous call. It's going to return a promise. That promise is returned by this entire thing, right? So our fetch wines function here is returning us a promise. That promise, once resolved, will contain JSON data. Okay, so I just want to make sure everyone understands what this function is actually going to return to us. It's returning a promise, right? So this entire thing returns a promise that will resolve to JSON data. So fetch wines here, if we look at our homepage, we are getting a promise back. Once that promise resolves, then we get the actual data and we can do whatever we want with the data. In this case, right now we're just console logging it, and we get the wines here. All right, as I mentioned, originally I was going to do async await. I wanted to do the .then here just to show it is possible. It does the same exact thing, just a different construct for it. So instead of doing this, I could simply add a await here, and then this will just be my data. Right, so instead of doing the .then like this, I could just add a await keyword. That's going to say whatever promise gets returned here, wait till it resolves, and only then to store the data from that promise that's resolved. So in this case, I don't need to do a .then. I should be able to console.log data here, and it should print out the same exact thing. So let me save that, refresh my page just for good measure. All right, there we go. Notice we got our wines object back as 3 entries, same as before. I want to make sure that everyone's good on this. Everyone super clear on using async await or .then. If there's any questions, please ask. Even if you think you know it, but still have some doubt, I want to make sure everyone understands promises and more specifically the fetch API here. So I'll pause for any fetch related questions or promise related questions. I know it's a complicated topic, so I want to make sure everyone's good with it. Okay, I'm gonna assume everyone's good with promises then. All right, so I'm gonna make that a little smaller. All right, so it looks like we're getting our data back correctly from our backend call. So fetch wines is the one submitting that backend call. We're getting data back. It looks like that's good. All right, so we actually have our data. Let's actually do something with it. So here, I want to update my state value, right? So what if I did something like this state.wines equals my data? Anyone have any ideas what this might do? Or equals?
I guess it changed a variable, but React wouldn't know that it changed.
Yep, Don said it correctly. So this isn't going to be a logical error. What I mean by logical error is that you're not going to see like a JavaScript exception or something being thrown. This is totally going to work in terms of JavaScript. You're going to update the state value with a new, some new value that you got. This works in JavaScript, but we're using React. So React needs some additional, has some additional overhead, and it wants to actually update your rendering when your wines value changes. If you do it manually, again, we said specifically, so I want to make this super clear. Do not set state values manually. All right, so in case anyone's watching this video and kind of jumping through it, I want to make this clear. Do not do this way. This will, again, not be a logical error, but this will prevent React from actually updating and re-rendering your component due to that state value. So render wineless is actually using our wine state value. This won't refresh or re-render automatically like it should, because we are not using that set state function here. So always remember, instead of setting it directly, you want to do in a class-based component, call set state, and then pass it the new state values. In this case, wines is going to be equal to data. All right, so this is the appropriate way that we want to do it. Let's call it appropriate way. Set state. All right, and adding in some comments, some typos, hopefully. Okay, so appropriate way is this dot set state, and then you want to pass it the state value you want to update. If you do it this way, again, your value will update in the back, on like the back side of things, but your React front end will not actually re-render. If I do it this way, we should see that our data gets set, and then hopefully we render our elements appropriately. So with that change, I'm going to hit save. Let's go here. Oh, we got an error. This dot state dot line is not a function. Okay, it's my bad. Let's try to figure out what's going on here.
It might be worthwhile to console log the data that you're setting wines equal to.
Yep, I was doing that here. So let's see if what got printed out. And let's see, making sure we're using the correct thing. So wines got printed out. It looks like it is a list, so it's an array. Sorry, not list, but it has entries. This dot state dot line is not that function. All right, let's figure out what. Yeah, let's print it out there. I think maybe that's what Jack was saying. So maybe it's not getting set appropriate here. So if I do console.log, let's print out what we're actually mapping over. Let's say, okay, let's see, do some debugging. And this is a skill that any software developer needs to have, is to debug their applications. So let's find that value here. I'm going to filter out my errors. All right, there we go. So we got some X values here that has entries. It looks like it's correct. Yeah, so let elements this dot state dot lines. Did I mistype it or something? Let's see. This dot state line, that looks correct to me. Any ideas from the crowd?
Can just out of curiosity, say, can you try this dot state dot wines dot wines?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, let's.
I don't know why it's doing that, but I think there's something funny going on there.
Actually, I think you're right. So looking at what actually got printed out, it's actually an object, it looks like. Notice there's curly braces here. Yeah, good catch there, Jack. So blowing this up a little bit, notice that our data is actually an object that has an entry called wines, and that wines is actually the array we want. So good catch there, Jack. So actually, I'm going to change how we set our data. So instead of setting this, I want data.wines, because that's going to be the actual array that I want to set. Yep, kudos to Jack for spotting that. So if I do it this way, there we go. All right, so that fixed it. Brownie points to Jack.
I'm just here, man.
No, I think that was, yeah, good catch there. I definitely missed that. So always want to know what type of data you're working with. As my my mistake for not looking at this closely and realizing it's an object we're getting back that has wines entry. And then we use .wines to get the actual array here. So it looks like we have Malbec, Ace of Spades, Franzia, which looks familiar from what we created in our backend. Okay, cool. So these are links, but right now these don't link to anything. Question, what do we actually want to link to here? Anyone know? When I click on Malbec, where should that actually go?
To the wine details.
Yep, so we want to know what the route is. So if we go back to our app.js, we want to look at the route that we had created before. So it looks like we want to go to /wines and then the wine ID from our front end column. So if I go to homepage, right here, we were not setting a href, so let's actually set appropriate href. I want to go to wines / actually, we don't want to use the a tag, we want to use the link tag. So if I go back up here, let's import link from, this comes from the React router. So that's where that's coming from. And we'll talk about if we use the a tag, what happens. Let's see if we can, let's return 2 items. Let's return a div. And then within that div, we're gonna have, let's see, h3. That's an a tag, and then we'll use the link tag and see if there's any difference. All right, so let's say this is a tag. Then we'll do a link tag. All right, so a link, again, that's a component being used by the router. A is just our standard anchor tag for HTML. They both essentially do the same thing, but I want to see if there's difference. If I do link to, I want to go to wines, and then we want to go to the wine ID. Anyone kind of know how I can get the wine ID here?
This .state.wines.id.
Good thought. So we don't need to use the state directly because we're iterating over each item. So each item should have the record we want. But yeah, thinking the right way. So here we should have access to item.id because that's what's being passed in our data. So we look at our data again. We have wine name, which we're accessing for the title. We should be able to access .id also from the item. Again, item here is each record within our wines array here. So each item is effectively a wine. In fact, we can name that wine if we want to. If we want to make that more clear, that might be easier for anyone reading this code. So again, this is a variable we're naming. In this case, we're iterating over a wines list. So we just call each item a wine. We get wine name here and wine ID here. So that's, sorry, that should be wine name. This should be wine ID. Looks like we need backticks for string interpolation. And we need our curly braces too. All right, so now that's going to be our target. Let's put that up here also.
Don't forget to close your link tag.
Thank you. A lot going on here, easy to forget. So a tag, we want the link tag. Okay, so we have an a tag and a link tag. Let's see how those behave. So if I
think you also need a close parenthesis after your last div.
Yep. You guys are great at spotting errors here. All right, so we got some warnings. Let's double check our warnings. Again, warnings aren't always detrimental. It says assign object to variable before exporting as module default. Where would I have done that?
It's in your
okay, I'm not going to worry about that warning. I think everything's fine. I'm not sure why it's yelling at me. But let's go back to our homepage. All right. So front end, homepage. Okay. So we have duplicates. Again, one's using an a tag, the other's using a link tag. If I click on the link tag, I'm taken to a wine page. So that looks good. I'm taken to a tag. Notice I'm also taken to a wine page. But there's a difference here. The difference is going through my a tag, it's actually going to clear my console. This effectively means your React app is kind of resetting. So I click on Malbec, notice that I have wines listed here. Let's refresh. Click on Malbec, notice I kind of refresh. Your entire page refresh, that's kind of like, again, resetting your app. Versus if I click on the link tag, notice I have some data here. Notice that my data persists. That means your React app has maintained its state and everything is still in order. So your link tag is not going to, again, reset or refresh your entire application. Clicking on this a tag here is effect like I'm typing a new URL here. versus using a link tag that's going to use your router functionality and kind of do things the way you kind of expect it to. Does that kind of make sense? Again, they both take you to the right page, but this triggers a refresh of your application. This does not. All right, so we generally want to use a link tag with our router so that we don't constantly refresh our application. All right, so I'm going to clear out our A tags because I want to use link. So we'll say bye-bye to that. All right, so it looks like we are able to get to our wine page, but our wine page has nothing exciting going on here. So let's actually implement that and get that going. All right, so here, we're gonna do something similar. We're gonna have components, say life cycle, components did mount. This will call something called get wine detail. So let's create that. Get wine detail. Let's make that async. Okay, so it's gonna be another fetch call. That's gonna use our other method here. So we had fetch wine by ID. That takes in a wine ID. Does anyone remember how I could actually get the wine ID from my wine page? So my wine page here, I need some ID, right? So let's say let wine ID equals, I don't know. So let's say, and then once I have
like a props.history.match.params kind of thing, because it's coming through the router link.
Yep. So again, the router, the reason we're using our router is because we get additional functionality. One being we get access to the URL that actually navigated to this component. So we do this.props. I think it's match.params.wine ID. I think that's right. I might need to double check, but this wine ID, again, the name of that is specified in your URL right here. So it's very similar to Django, where you create like a kind of a template to capture a value. In this case, we named it wine ID, capital ID. So we must match that name in our wine page here. Right, assuming that gets us our wine ID, we should be able to do call. So let's do let data equals await. Don't forget your await keywords. We're going to import wine API from, again, need to import it. We're going to use something that's external. So you have wine API, we should be able to do wine API get wine detail. That's fetch wine by ID. All right, we need to pass it a wine ID. So let's have some stuff here. What do I want to do? Let's do console.log. Did I miss something here? What's going on here? All right, one ID and one. Something looks wrong with my syntax.
Anchor, your import is form and not from.
Thank you. That looks like that was the issue. All right, thank you. One ID, okay. Once we get our data, let's console log our data. See what we're doing. Okay, so wine detail. Let's see if that works. Go to nullback. All right, looking at my console, looks like we got something like I was expecting. So this is an object. Object has a field of ID, wine name, price, varietal, etc. Looks like that looks correct from what I remember us entering. So the ID here is 1. And that makes sense because that's the ID we requested. Okay, I think that's what I expected. So now that we're getting the appropriate data back, I want to store that in a state value. So I'll do state equals for this wine, be null by default. And then we want to render some details here. So let's create a function. This dot render wine detail. Okay, so we should have a render method for that. detail. That takes in nothing. And this will return something. So first thing, notice by default, we set it to null. So you don't want to access anything off of a null object. So again, if you remember our lifecycle, let's just go over it again. We're going to initially render something, and only then are we going to call component did mount. So this first render will actually go through when your state value is null for wine. So you want to keep that in mind. So it's going to be null initially, so you don't want to try to use it without it having something. So in this case, I want to actually check it. This.state.wine, let's say is not. So this not symbol is basically saying if it's something null, then this will evaluate to true. So it's going to basically, if this is something false, null is a falsy value. It's going to flip that and make it true. So that if it's null, we'll get into this if block, and we'll just say return nothing. Or return null, that's fine. Otherwise, in the common case where we have something in lines, we want to return, just make it in line. Let's return an H2. And this will be, let's say, this.state.wine. What do we have? Wine name. Maybe make that an H1 since that's the main detail. Get rid of wine page here. All right, so this.state.wine curly brace. All right, what else do we have? We had price, I believe. Make that an H. Let's make that a paragraph. Any questions as we're kind of typing this up? Want to make sure everyone is following along and understanding what we're going about doing here in the front end. Thanks for catching all my mistakes. Typing fast has its downside. All right, price. What else do we have? We had description, I think.
The BSB left of the backslash.
What was that?
Your closing P tags, the P has to be left of the slash. It's why you're getting all the errors.
I don't follow that. You're saying
Never mind. Forget it. I'm dumb.
No, you're not dumb, but
It's
yeah.
the
So
curly, the brackets is uneven amount of them.
oh, I know what the error is. Again, easy to forget. Whenever you're returning something, you can only return one parent element. In this case, I've created 3 parent elements. So they actually hover over this error. Notice it says JSX expressions must have 1 parent element. So always good to just wrap all that goodness in a div, and that should alleviate those red squiggly lines. Let's do that quickly. Let me just get this finished. So we have name, price, description. What else do we have? We had varietal, color. Let's just add those in quickly. So this up to an, let's call it an H3. And then the rest of them can be paragraphs. So we had price, varietal, I don't know how to spell it. Spell it. Fee. I think that's how it was. All right. Varietal. And color was our last starting, I think. Okay, so a little tedious there, but hopefully we got all the details we want to show. Again, we don't have to show everything. We probably don't want to show the ID to the user. Again, IDs are used internally, so we don't need to display that to the user. So let's just leave that as is. All right, so returning a div. That div has a bunch of child elements in it. And then hopefully everything goes according to plan. We should make our fetch call. Where is it? Up here. This should give us back that wine object. That wine object, we want to set it to our state value. So we'll do this dot set state and update wine with our data. Okay, let's get rid of these console logs. Let's comment them out. Right here, so we're extracting, just going through all the steps. Once we navigate to this page, this.props.match.params.wine ID should contain the actual ID in the URL. We're taking that from the URL, grabbing the wine ID. So that's kind of how we structured our application here. Using that ID we get from the URL, we're able to pass that to our fetch call, which should get us the appropriate wine matching that ID. Once we get that data back, and await means there's going to be a promise that's going to take some time to resolve. Once we get that data back, we should be able to set the data directly to our wine state value. Once that happens, a re-render should happen, and we should be able to access this part of our rendering. So with all that in set, let's go back here. All right, notice, looks like we got our details. Let's go back to our page here. So let's go to Ace of Spades. Yep, $2,000, pricey wine. Tim made that suggestion, and then color is white for that fancy champagne. Has anyone had Ace of Spades? Tim, have you had Ace of Spades?
I have seen it, but I never had it.
He's already seen it, yeah. I'm not sure I'd feel even comfortable drinking that expensive wine. But okay, so it looks like we've hooked that up correctly. So again, homepage, we make a call to just the wine list backend. So we get the data back and we only show the title here, even though we have more details. We use the wine name to show the title and the wine ID so that we can link it to our front end page, which gives us a wine ID that we can use that wine ID to make a query to the back end for the wine details. Okay, so that looks like that's working correctly. Let's go back to our curriculum page, make sure we checked off everything that was being asked of us. So I'm gonna quickly scroll through here. All right, so we set up our API calls using fetch. Again, we're not using Heroku right now, so just make sure your path is correct. In this case, mine is localhost. We set up our wine details page. So here they're using something called Bootstrap table. This was something that I failed to install because I think it just doesn't work with the latest React. So if you are copying the code from the curriculum page, just note that this might not work for you. You might want to kind of refactor it, not use Bootstrap table, or use something else instead of Bootstrap table. For me, I just decided to print out as H1s and some paragraphs. Either way, I got the data I wanted shown here. What questions do you guys have? No questions? You guys sure?
I played around a bit with this on Friday. Like it follows the hard part is getting Django to accept the request from React, and that's just like really fiddly links.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. The whitelisting and the cores issues kind of annoying at times, but it's something you got to get around. Let's see.
If we're gonna like do this up on Heroku, is like the best practice to have like the React front end as its own app that reaches over to the back end, or do you like send this whole pile up together?
Great question. You can do it either way. I think the way you probably want to do it is have them as separate applications on Heroku, just because again, your backend can be requested from any front end. So, I mean, to simulate that, it's better just to have your front end kind of separated out. But again, you can create one project that has both apps in it. Okay, so let's actually talk about Heroku. It is a little tricky. I know we haven't had too much practice with it. So let's actually see if we could actually push this up to Heroku and get it so working. All right, so this is all running on my local host right now. I want to deploy it to Heroku so that you guys, can navigate to it also. Let's go through the steps required for getting it to Heroku. So for that, I'm going to bring up a new, this is my front end. I'm going to go to my back end first and throw up my Django server up to Heroku. So to do that, let me bring up a new bash. All right, got that there. All right, so let's go through all the steps. There's a number of them, so it's easy to forget. Probably want to take notes down, or get enough practice that you don't need notes. So first, I'm in my virtual environment. That looks good. Second, I want to install something called G Unicorn, also known as Green Unicorn. So do pip install Gunicorn. I don't know how people pronounce it, Gunicorn or G Unicorn or whatever you want to call it. Just make sure you get the right one. All right, so it looks like I reinstalled that stuff. It must have been our requirements.
That was in your requirements, so.
Yep, it looks like, yep, that was already there. We also want something called Django Heroku, which I think is also in here. Yep. So again, if we didn't have a requirements.txt as we're doing this from scratch, you need to install both these items using pip install. So pip install G Unicorn, pip install Django -Heroku. All right, so it looks like that's already been done for us. I can skip over that. It's good to see. What's next? Update dependencies. We don't need to do that. All right, next thing we need to do is go to our settings file. So this is our project settings in Django. I know we've been flipping back and forth between React and Django, but we are in our Django backend. In our settings, we want to go to the top, import Django Heroku. Looks like our settings file already has that. Again, if you're doing this from scratch, you gotta make sure you're actually adding this import. So by default, a Django project will not have Django Heroku imported, but it looks like that was done for us by whoever created this project, so it's good. Just checking this off our mental checklist. At the bottom, we want something like this. We want Django Heroku settings, and then pass it locals, which is a function call looks like. So that's checked off. All right, so just a review, again, we're not typing all these things, so it's kind of done for us, but install gunicorn, install Django Heroku, update your dependencies file, so do a pip freeze of requirements.txt. In your Django project settings, you want to import Django Heroku, and then you want to make sure you have the settings call at the bottom of your file, or close to your bottom of your settings file. All right, next we need to create a proc file. So I think that's already done for us with this project. Looking at our proc file, again, it's easy to kind of mess this up. So make sure you type it exactly as you need to. You want web : space G unicorn space again. And this is where it needs to match your project name. So in this case, our project in this example is called wine_API. You might have named yours differently, so just make sure you update this appropriately as needed. And you do .wsgi. Okay, that stands for Web Server Gateway Interface. Okay, so after that's done, again, proc file, just to review, should be at your manage.py level. It must be named proc file with a capital P, PROCFILE, no file extension, and you want this line of code at the very top. I've messed this up before where like I had the wrong, I think I used my app name instead of project name sometimes. Proc file, maybe I had like an extension accidentally or didn't use a capital P or didn't have it in the right location. Again, very easy to screw it up, so make sure you follow directions exactly. All right, next up, we want to log into Heroku. So I can do this with my command line. If you type in Heroku login -I, you should be able to do it in your terminal, maybe. All right, so email, I think I used, that's my email. So password, that's where I gotta remember my password. I think I remember it, but fingers crossed. All right, cool. So it looks like I successfully logged in with my email account that I set up on Heroku. So if you've never created a Heroku account before, you need to create it. Assuming you have an account created, you can use the terminal by doing Heroku login -I and then log in straight from your terminal. All right, so make sure you have a Heroku account already created if you want to do this step here. All right, next in our list, we want to create a Heroku project. So here I'm going to type Heroku. Heroku creates, and then my project name. So I'm going to call it, let's call it wine API new. All right, that's going to be my project on Heroku. I got a warning, update available. It shouldn't be an issue, so I'll kind of ignore that warning. All right, so we created our project. Now we want to push actually to Heroku. So to do that, we can do Heroku :git remote, sorry, git :remote -a, and then your project name. So in this case, I call my project wine-API-new. It's gonna, okay, so notice that my git is now pointing to Heroku. So again, we have two git points at this point. So if I type git remote -v, nope, -v lowercase. Yep. So notice we have 2 points. We go to origin. Origin is pointing at our GitHub because that's where we clone down this project from. So if I did a git push origin, it's going to update my GitHub files with whatever changes I'm pushing up. We also have another endpoint for our Git project now called Heroku. So if you actually want your Heroku project to update, you'll do a git push Heroku to get your changes up there. Okay, so we have 2 points. The way I kind of view this right now is our origin repository is our tests repository. So any changes we want to test, you should push to your origin and kind of save it there. Once you verify that your, any changes you made actually work, at that point, you want to push to your production site. In this case, our Heroku website, there's our production website that's client facing. So any of you guys go into that website, are going to see the changes at that point if I push it to Heroku. All right, so here if we do a git add, git commits, say initial Heroku deployment. Okay, and now I want to push to Heroku, so I'll do a git push Heroku. I think master would be the branch. Okay, so now I actually pushed the Heroku. I actually didn't push up to my origin, which I think I contradicted myself. I probably, again, you want to test your changes first, which we kind of did on our local machine. So if you also update our origin. So we have two different points. Our Heroku Git repository is being updated right now. Our GitHub right now does not have any of the changes we've added. So it looks like it's still doing some things. All right, it's taking some time. It should be done shortly. Oh, all right, so again, we have two different Git projects now. One that's going to point to Heroku. Heroku has its own Git project that you could upload to. Your GitHub also has a Git project that you can upload to, or a Git repository. All right, so it looks like that's 65 megabytes. Okay, so it looks like it's deployed to Heroku. If I actually go to my Heroku website on my browser, Heroku Cloud Application Platform. Let me log in quickly. All right. I'll do that later. Probably should have that set up before. All right, so notice I have Wine API new here, probably a little tiny on your screen. All right, it looks like I created some previous project before, but the new one I created is Wine API-new. If I click on it, I should see a build history. So notice, let's see, it looks like it was deployed just now, today at 11:50 a.m. So like 2 minutes ago is when the build succeeded. So it's pretty quick. But once I push the changes, it built my application and had it running. One important thing to kind of keep in mind here. Heroku is not going to use the database on your local machine. This is very easy to forget, but important to remember that Heroku is going to create its own Postgres database. That database needs to have the structures that Django requires. So just like we do for a local machine, we need to do a migration to the new Heroku database that got created. So to do that, we run Heroku, run Python manage.py migrate. So what's going to happen here?
You've got a typo there.
Typo.
A ton instead of run.
Thank you. All right, I could get nothing past you guys. All right, so what's going to happen here is we basically committed all of these files here to Heroku. All right, so Heroku actually has your migrations files already. So you don't need to recreate, you don't need to rerun make migrations. These files already exist on Heroku's end. The only thing that's missing from Heroku is the migrate. That never happened, right? So we need to actually tell Heroku, hey, migrate the migration files so that the database that Heroku created for you has appropriate structures. So if I run this, all right, I should probably update my Heroku at some point. So keep getting that warning, but now it's actually updating the Postgres database on the Heroku side. All right, so notice I reran those migrations, new stuff got added, and we should get to go now. Right, so I think that completes all the steps for deploying a Heroku. Let's actually see if I can get to that that site. So we're open app. All right, looks familiar. If you guys can kind of see that, let's go to /wines. All right, notice we have no data. Again, this is similar. This is the same reason because it created its own database. This is where fixtures come into play. If you guys have not messed with fixtures, might be a good time to learn it. Because in this case, we need to recreate our data because our local database has data. Our Heroku database is not. We can still use the admin panel. That is still accessible. So I go to admin here. But we don't have our super user here either. So if we want to create a super user, we should be able to do Heroku run Python manage.py create super user. Again, your super user is stored in your database, so we need to create another one for the new database. It's doing its thing. Should prompt me for what I want. Maybe in 3 seconds, 2, 1.
Wouldn't it be possible to export our data and then import it into the database on Heroku?
You can do it via fixture. So fixtures would be one way to do it. There might be other ways to migrate it from your local database to Heroku's database. So you might have options, but I think fixtures would be the best way to do it so that your initial seed data is always consistent. But in this case, I'm creating a new super user. So let's call it admin. In this case, I'm going to use a more secure password since this is exposed to the web. I don't want anyone accessing my admin panel. So I'm not going to use my default non-secure passwords. Let's go with one password that I can remember. It's too common, really. I'll go with it. Hopefully you guys can't crack my password, but all right, super user created successfully. Cool. So now that that's been done, let's see if I actually log into my, again, this is my Heroku app. I don't know if you guys can see my address bar. It's a little tiny font. But I do admin and the password I created. All right, there we go. We can create some wines. Let's just create some made up wines here. We'll call it Capri Sun. Price is $3.99. Clear. Color. Do save. Let's add a couple more. So we'll have IC price $3.99. That's how fruits. Description, sugar plus let's say multicolor.
Is Cheerios a wine?
I don't think that would make a delicious wine. I'll stick with known liquids. So I see. Let's
Great
go with
drink.
Hawaiian.
Oh yeah, I forgot about great drink.
49. I don't know. Tropical. I know these aren't legit values. Maybe color, I think it's red, not the color red wine. All right, so we have some data. I'm not going to get too extravagant with it. We should be able to see our IDs, right? So ID 3 for Hawaiian Punch. Good to know. All right, so given that, let's go back to our endpoint of wines. Okay, notice we have data. So the question is, can we actually access this from our localhost React? So I'm gonna go back to my localhost and where do I want to get to? This is not my front end. My front end is here. So if I go to Wine API, our previous endpoint or backend was at localhost. We no longer have that as our backend. So what if I try to actually go to that Heroku site now? So let's change our base URL to be whatever I see here. I'm going to copy that URL, paste it into here. All right, so our new endpoint that's running on Heroku is wine-api-new.herokuapp.com/wines /. All right, let's see if this works. Notice that I don't have anything here. Let's go back to my homepage, which was here. Okay, so I'm getting my data here. I'm actually surprised that I'm getting my data here.
You're still on localhost.
I am a localhost for my front end, but my back end now is.
Oh, yeah, right.
So I am getting the data back from my back end, and actually I am surprised I am because I thought I would need to have some core stuff. So I'm a little perplexed here. So we're getting our data back. Again, this is our new data from our new database. Question is, why did I not have to whitelist my new? Let's see. Oh, I know why. Sorry, John. Maybe this is what you're saying, but yeah, my backend settings. Notice my whitelist is still here. So this never changed. So I need to update a new site. The question is, what if I put my React front end onto Heroku also? Well, at that point, I'll need to add that to my whitelist where that URL is. If you go to the curriculum page, we actually kind of talk about this. I think we do, but there's this location called Cores Anywhere. If you navigate to this for your Heroku app, so your prefix for your URL has to be this entire thing, https coresanywhere.herokuapp.com, and then your URL. this will circumvent the core's security stuff for your Heroku app. So if you actually want to see this, let's actually quickly deploy our front end. I know we're hitting lunchtime here, so let's hopefully do this quickly. See if I remember how to do all this. So this is our back end. Go to our front end. Bring up a new terminal here. All right, so I want to create another Heroku project. So for this, I should be able to just do, what is it? Let's do Heroku login -I. Okay, so for your backend, you need Unicorn and all that stuff. For your front end, you need far less items. So you don't need to install Unicorn for your front end. So here I should be able to just create a project. So if I do, well, let me type Heroku create. Let's call this wine API. It's called wine front end new. Okay, so that's another project separate from my backend. I don't need to, again, I don't need to create a database. This is just our front end. So we should have a project there. We'll do a git Heroku. Still want to create a new git endpoint. So we'll do Heroku git :remote -a, and then it was wine front end new. All right, so it's gonna, again, create another repository for us that we could commit to. We do a git add, git commits initial front. And then do a git push Heroku master. All right, so if everything went correct, let's go back to our website. This will take maybe some time. All right, no modules, that'll take some time, but let's see. Let's go back to Heroku. All right, so notice that I have my wine front end new project created. So that's going to be my React app, and then my wine API is my Django project. So now that that's up, let's see what the progress is. Notice it's still building. So if you can see my log here, it's building some stuff, view build progress. See some details there, but it should be done in the next minute, I think. Once that's up, let's see if we can actually access our backend on Heroku. If not, we might need to make some changes. All right, hopefully that doesn't take too much longer. Any questions about Heroku deployment?
I was worried that React was going to be a mess, but it looks like it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so again, only for your backend, you need Unicorn and the proc file and all that stuff. For your front end React, it's pretty much just pushing it to Heroku and it's good to go. You don't need to run any more commands. Hopefully this will be done. I didn't realize it'll take this long. It looks like it's 70 megabytes launching. All right, cool. Let's refresh this. Let's see if it's finished. All right, looks like it deployed. The build in progress is still going. Let's see if we could actually launch this though. Will anything come up, or it's still building? All right, might kind of curtail this if it takes a little too long to build. But I want to actually show us something. Come on. So it's deployed, but still building. Heroku can be a little slow, but all right, it looks like build succeeded. It says my front end actually show up now. Looks like it doesn't want to show. It's doing something. All right, we'll see if this comes up in the next 10 seconds, maybe 15. Come on, Heroku. All right, Not sure why it won't show me my page. All right. Oh, there we go. All right. So we got homepage. We saw this before. Let me actually toss this over here. All right. So we got to our homepage, but notice we got nothing listed in terms of our data. The question is, why did we not get any data? So if I bring up my terminal or my console here, notice we got nothing back. So that's not good. Why did we get nothing back? Well, let's look at our URL. So front end, our base URL was where our backend should be. We got nothing back. So something's going wrong here. And this is where, again, the whitelisting comes into play. So one way around that, if we can try this quickly, go to our curriculum page. I'm going to copy the base of cores anywhere. So this, again, this circumvents the cores protection. So if I copy that and add that to my base, save that. And now I need to redeploy. So I'm going to do a push. So that'll be git push Heroku master. Everything up to date. That is.
Gonna add and commit.
Thank you. Yes. All right. Hopefully that build won't take as long. But okay, so we're going to cores anywhere. Again, just kind of know that this is one way around the cores thing. The ideal way, though, if I can get to it, is in your settings file in your backend. Again, we're switching windows often, so make sure we know where we are. This is our Django project. You need to add another whitelist for your front end. So now, again, our front end has been deployed to, what is it? Where did it go? Yeah, so our front end now is https://wine-frontend. Again, that's my project name. So you guys might have used a different project name. So this is where our requests are going to be coming from. So if I actually copy that, let's see if this is deployed. All right, still building. So we'll let that run. All right, so I'm going to make my changes, but I'm not going to commit them. So I just want to make sure we could see what difference we get. So here I'm going to add to my whitelist another URL. So this is going to say, hey, I'm granting you access. I'm not sure if the slash matters. I think we had an issue with the slash before, so we'll leave that off. All right, so our whitelist is updated. We're going to push that to Heroku so that it actually updates, but let's wait for our front end to get it complete here. All right, build succeeded. Let's see how our app's doing. Still building. Sorry for taking some time here. I think our React project should build quicker, but it seems like Django's quicker than React here. Any last questions? I know we're getting to lunchtime, so we can wrap this up in the next few minutes. But again, deploying to Heroku should be straightforward once you do it more. I actually have notes written for the Django deployment just because there's like a dozen steps I need to follow, including installing GUnicorn, installing Django Heroku, make sure your settings file is updated, creating the proc file. There's a lot to it. So easy to forget one step here or there. All right, build succeeded. Let's try to get there from our front end. So if I go here, let's see if that comes in. Nothing yet. I do know that the cores anywhere path is kind of slow. So is that going to come in anytime? Maybe. Let's see if we get any errors. Errors. Forbidden. That's not good. Expected token S. All right, so it looks like I'm getting some garbage back. That's not good. Forbidden. So, oh, I think I remember what I need to do. Sorry for kind of jumping around the place. If I navigate to this location, I think you need to enable something temporarily. So if I actually copy my URL here, let's try going to that location. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys can see this, but you need to request temporary access to this cores anywhere thing. So if I click request temporary access, we currently have temporary access to demo server. So given that, let's see if I can refresh here. All right, there we go. Notice we got our wines back. All right, so again, a lot of steps there. When you're using cores anywhere, just know that you got to request temporary access. It's just, again, something with this project that got created. to circumvent the course anywhere thing. Once I enable that, notice I got recent IC Hawaiian punch. But what if I don't want to go to course anywhere? Again, this is just for testing purposes. Normally you don't want to navigate to course anywhere. So let's actually navigate to back where we were before. Right, so I actually want to go to where my project is. I don't want to, go through the course anywhere hack sort of. So I'm going to change my base URL back to that. Let's commit that quickly. All right, so that's going to run. Hopefully it'll be done in the next few minutes. But for my backend, I want to actually commit this change. So now it said, hey, this new project should have access to my to the whitelist or to the backend here. So we whitelisted that URL. So since we made a change, we need to push that to the Heroku repository. So to do that, we'll do a git add, git commit, we'll say added whitelists URL. And then we want to do a git push. Again, we're pushing to Heroku. So our GitHub has not been updated. That does not have any of our changes as of yet, because we've not done a push to our origin, which is our GitHub. So this master. Your account has reached. Okay. Looks like, again, the free version of Heroku doesn't let you simultaneously build, so it looks like I gotta wait for my front end. I don't know if I want to hold you guys hostage here, but essentially, once you actually add that to your whitelist, you should be able to directly access it from your front end. All right, if you guys bear with me, maybe for like a couple minutes, let's see if this finishes. If not, by 12:15, we'll get you guys to lunch either way. All right, build succeeded. That's good to see. Again, that error I got was because I was trying to build 2 projects at once. I guess free Heroku does not let you do that. Let's see if now I can do it. Nope.
Ankur, I think you can do a Heroku restart, and that should restart the Heroku repo.
So do that here instead of pushing to it?
Yeah, just type in Heroku restart and see if that works. Yeah, and then try again.
Okay. I think it was because the other project was still building. The front end was still building, but I think that finished. Okay, let's see if this finishes. But otherwise, again, the main goal of today was to kind of understand, again, we created our Django backend last week. We wanted to show that, hey, we can create a React app instead of calling third-party APIs, we can call our own API just like before with third-party APIs. So here, let's see if this finishes in the next minute or two. Yeah, so this process, again, can be kind of slow. It's much easier to kind of work out your local machine. It looks like that completed. All right, let's see if anything's up right now. So backend projects, do you exist? All right, looks like build succeeded. Let's open that app. Okay, that looks like we expect. Wines. All right, so let's see if we can actually make that call. So both our front end and back end should have been updated because we pushed the Heroku. Let's refresh that. All right, there we go. Notice we're getting our data and we're using the correct URL. So our URL now from our front end is actually pointed to our back end online. So you guys should be able to, if you want to play along at home, you should be able to go to HTTPS, what is it? This is localhost. You should be able to go to wine. Let me just paste it. I'll post it in Oscar chat in case you want to mess around with it. And nothing too exciting. Your project should be more exciting. But you should be able to access my webpage if anyone wants to verify that they can get to it. The link I'm sending in.
I have it quite right, but it's not working.
All right, I posted my link for my project in the Oscar chat. Can anyone get to it, or do you guys get any errors?
It's working on my end.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so now anyone on the web can get to my website, and that website has access to my backend. So only my front end can access the backend data. So currently, like if Jack created his own project, he would not be able to get the data from my backend. So I would need to whitelist his API or his URL front end. All right, so again, that was deploying to Heroku and kind of covering both basically the last 9 weeks of building up to this, where we were able to create a front end and a back end, and now we can serve up our own data and kind of have a full stack application going.
I think because you have it set for cores anywhere, I can get at your wine API. Like I'm looking at your high C JSON right now.
Using the cores anywhere, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think is why.
Yep, yeah, you can go through the cores anywhere. Again, that circumvents the cores protection. So since I allowed temporary access through that window, if you guys remember, where was that?
I'm going to directly to the link you gave us and it works.
Yeah, you should be able to get to it through my link. This is for getting to my backend data. You got to go through cores anywhere, I believe.
I'm just hitting straight the link.
Like to get to your.
Yeah,
I think
you can
go
get to my you can get to my backend directly, but your API, if you write a front end, you will not be able to access the data in my backend directly. If that makes
got
sense.
it. Yeah. Now I'm caught up.
Yeah, so my backend data is available via Django server that's running. But if you wrote your own front end and want to make API calls to my backend, you would not have access because you need to whitelist it. So I would need to permission your app in the whitelist here, just like I did for my own app. If Jack or Don or whoever else create their own app, I could add like access to their front ends to access my backend that way. All right.
Cool.
Cool is a good way to summarize all that we've done today. So with that, let's kind of go over your challenges for today. So today's August 2nd. Scroll down. Looks like your challenge for today is just to get this up and running. So again, we provide you the back end, but if you created your own, probably just use that one and kind of make sure you're able to create a front end. So it's more React practice. And then deploying to Heroku is that bonus step. If you run into issues, definitely reach out. Again, there's a few steps to it. Again, the course thing is not kind of fun to work with if you run into that issue. But reach out in Oscar's questions channel if you run into any Heroku deployment issues or any issues with using React. Again, there are a few landmines out there, as I highlighted, like forgetting that / in your front end URL can cause you issues, and it's not evident kind of what's going on there. All right, guys, thanks for sticking with me a little bit into lunch, but hopefully you guys have a good lunch, and then after you get back from lunch, get to your challenge for today.